Joining us now is CBS News political director Steve Chaggaris. Steve, good morning.
Good morning.
Strangely, this might qualify as a quiet week at the White House. But what do we make of this cryptic calm before the storm comment, as Errol called it, the presidential riddle?
Yeah, I think it's the latest episode of what does Donald Trump really mean when he says something, right? I mean, we've played this game since he became a presidential candidate. He says something, we then try to ascribe a motive for it, to try to figure out what he's talking about. I think the thing that has people a little bit unnerved about this is he did this standing in front of a bunch of military leaders. And it led to a lot of people asking the question, does he, with the tensions between Iran and the United States, with North Korea, does he mean something more than just throwing a line out there like he's done in the past? No one really knows. We've asked a lot of questions. They haven't answered. So we're trying to figure this one out. Well,
in the Department of the Inscrutable, what happens now between the State Department and the White House, specifically as it concerns Secretary of State Rex Tillerson? He called the president a name. We know the president is no fan of personal insults when they are directed towards him.
Well, but the president and the president's spokesperson says that he still has confidence in Rex Tillerson. I think this is a frayed relationship. We've seen that play out publicly, but it doesn't seem like there's much of a desire to tell Tillerson to go at this point. There's been enough shakeups going on at this White House. I think losing another cabinet member, especially in light of what happened with the Health and Human Services Secretary and his
private jet travel.
Private jet.
But given the issues, given the issues we've got now with North Korea, with Iran, I mean, how much longer can a relationship that is as frayed as this one is can it continue, given what's at stake here?
I mean, that's a very good question. I think the issue here is how much are people listening to the president and how much are people listening to the president's advisors? And if the sense is that Tillerson and Defense Secretary Mattis and Chief of Staff John Kelly have a lot to say in this operation and they can continue to run what they're doing parallel to what the president's doing, then maybe it can run for a while. I think the sense is there's those folks, and there's been some reporting that those folks are sticking together to work with this president to make sure they keep him on the right track. And so it's a bigger issue for those guys as opposed to just turning their backs and walking away.
And there is a lot on the horizon, Steve. I mean, the president is reportedly going to decertify the Iran nuclear deal. What are the implications of that? It gets kicked to Congress. What do we expect to happen? Well,
that's another question, because the president's talked tough on the campaign and since about the Iran deal, calling it the worst deal ever and calling it an embarrassment when he went to the UN. But there's not necessarily a slam dunk situation in Congress to kill this thing, right? Republicans have talked tough, but then you look at what, especially in the Senate, there's only a two-seat majority in the Senate, and there's some Republican senators who say, wait a minute, let's step back here, let's look at this. Are we ready to pull the plug on this yet? You have pressure from foreign governments, especially Europeans who are involved in this deal, saying don't pull out of this. And so it might not be the slam dunk. It might be be him punting to Congress, let them deal with it.
So I was going to say, what's his motive then in kicking it back to Congress?
Well, he can say that he decertified, and he can tell his supporters, hey, look, I'm still calling this deal terrible, but it's up to Congress to fix this. And we've seen what happens when the president leaves it to Congress to fix things. They haven't really been fixed, right? Obamacare is a classic.
Well, on that note of Obamacare, the president is making good on a promise he made to religious leaders. He is narrowing the contraception coverage mandate. There is going to be a lot of hue and cry, potential lawsuits. Why spoil for an ideological fight right now?
Well, first of all, keep in mind, the religious conservatives, evangelicals, this is one of the most unequivocal supporters of this president. And so this is a little reward to them to say, look, you know what, I thank you for all your support throughout the campaign and through my presidency at a point when he's not the most popular person in the country. So there's that. But it's also interesting, you look at the birth control part of this, and they framed some of this in the deregulation push, which this president has really been going since the beginning of his presidency, rolling back Obama-era regulations. I think that's going to be a big legal argument for them if this goes to the courts.
A lot of action at the courts. Steve Chaggaris, always good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks. Welcome back.
Thank you. Tomorrow morning on Face the Nation right here on CBS, John Dickerson's guests will include Wayne LaPierre, Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, and Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California.